Artemis, it's a pleasure to virtually meet you. You know, I would love for this to just be an organic conversation between. I wish my wife could chime in, but her schedule is very hectic. So
Mhm.
I'll let you introduce, and then I'll kind of briefly follow that, and we'll just get into it.
Okay. Well, everybody, my name is Artemus Jenkins. I'm a contemporary artist. I'm calling myself that these days since, my work is doing the museum thing. And, this is the second exhibit for this particular piece that, like I created earlier this year has been in. But a lot of people know me as a documentarian and as a filmmaker. Made like some short films and web series and some narrative things. And I believe a lot in, keeping my own personal archive of, the things that I shoot, because then it provides me the free space to be a part of things like this. So that kind of sums me up. And I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. So, like, not the DMV, but, adjacent.
Pleasure, brother. Hello, everyone. One half of Workplay. I work with my wife, Danielle McCoy. We have small studio. We basically do graphic design, printmaking, all sorts of experimental processes. And basically, we like to, refer to redacted histories and omitted histories and kind of reposition them in the public sphere and hopefully to cause some cognitive dissonance. So for us, this is information that we've gotten from family members during discussions or our own personal research. And it's been learning and unlearning. So we have an archive of this information.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very excited, Artemis, to kind of talk about archives. What made you start, collecting or wanting to collect an archive as you, make your work?
Um, a point, that you made, just about being able to question and get an understanding for, like, who controls archives, and being able to challenge that in some type of way. So, I think we might be on this in this particular discussion together because of those reasons. But I know our process is maybe a little different. Like, in general, for me, it's just really about the things that I saw, like seeing things, like the really iconic photos of, our leaders who have passed on or maybe are still with us, knowing that these images exist, but also knowing that most of the people who take those images, are not the people from our community, which means that uh, people outside of the community get to determine the relevance of images that detail our history. So they're like, thousands and maybe even millions of like things and images that exist, but because it's not important to somebody, they feel like it's not important to anybody. So I just wanted to be a part of a legacy of people who are in control of, the things that we document and say about ourselves, and just also being a part of that lineage of information that can be available, and being able to understand more about how to position, the work that I do to be available to people in the public space.
Man, that's so interesting that you say that because um, that's kind of like the driving force for us to
Mm-hmm.
have this archive of information. Um, you know, I didn't learn about these things in high school.
Mm-hmm.
My dad, my parents, quote unquote, sent me to a good school.
Right.
But what is a good school really? I felt more ignorant after I've gone to, high school, a good high school, a good 2 year community college, and then a university, and then grad school. And all of this time I've spent in the classrooms, no one ever discussed any of these histories that we have kind of, unearthed.
Mm-hmm.
You said something interesting about the people that's documenting, our movements and things that these milestones within our community. One thing that really tripped me up when I thought about histories and just that tidbit that you said, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with Ernest Withers, correct?
Mostly because I did see that in the information that was given to me to look at, or at least to review, based around your work. I, yeah, that was my first time really seeing his name and understanding like, who he is. But I did at least know that MLK had like, a personal photographer. Malcolm X did too, or at least a couple of them. So yeah.
The brother, this blew me away that Ernest Withers, which I'm not in no way taking away from his talents. I
Hmm.
mean, he is a photographic icon. We have images from the Memphis sanitation workers strike. People in the streets with "I am a man." It's a very iconic image. He's a heavyweight in the game that
Hmm.
has been documenting these milestones. But what is left out of the public conversation is the fact that he was a paid FBI informant.
Hmm.
And I think that hurts a little more because it's your own, as we say sometimes, to be your own people.
Hmm.
As they say in I have folks from the South, Mississippi, Carolinas, you name it, and they would always say all skin folks ain't kin folks.
Hmm.
And that was just clear. It's like, how could this man, and they talked about it. He would have three rolls of film. So we have one for himself, one for press, and then another for the FBI. And he was a good friend of MLK. You
Yeah.
know, he was trusted, but to that point, that was the demise of that movement.
Hmm.
He was actually in the hotel room, right before MLK was assassinated. I mean, and hey, look, connect the dots. I
Hmm.
mean, we know what COINTELPRO is. We know how it worked. And now someone historically that is a titan when it comes to capturing and documenting, archiving these milestones. Not only were they for archival purposes, they kind of had a dual life. It was the death of this movement. And that to me is just a trip to kind of wrap my head around.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So things like that. I mean, just even a general point, all skin folk and kinfolk. Historically, that's been the case. A really interesting book that I got to read in like 2019, like right at the end. Zora Neale Hurston's Barracoon.
Mm.
Uh, it was like it was I think a book that she was going to release before like Eyes Were Watching God and all of that, and it came to me like in a really timely way. Like when I read that Eyes Were Watching God, to your point about high school, like it was just a book that they said we had to read, but
Mhm.
maybe I missed the part where I learned that she was one of the first like ethnographic just first ethnographers, just period.
Mhm.
The tools of ethnography like have changed over time just based off of technology. So
Mhm.
naturally, like her as a writer, in the 1900s, the style that she wrote in was influenced by being able to bring people to that particular moment, that particular place. But
Mhm.
in this book, Barracoon, she it was just her documentation of it's called the last cargo. So
Mhm.
she was working with or documenting this man, and I forgot the names and everything. I've got to do something better with my memory, but he
Mhm.
was like actually in slavery, and he
Mm.
was also actually able to remember being in Africa. So
Mhm.
he remembered being shipped into slavery by his own people. He remembered the voyage. He remembered being in slavery. He remembered getting out of slavery. He remembered starting a family, and he basically like watched most of his family die, and then it was just him. So, um, like those types of things, just in terms of, like the idea of it being your own people, like it's not really a new thing. It's part of the reason why I don't really watch the news, like we were saying beforehand, or, like, because a lot of the stuff is just really the same. I mean, the spin that they try to put on things and the information that they leave out. I mean, the system itself is not really different. So to me, it's just kind of like, you know, Maybe I should just look at something else.
You know what? So here's a funny story. I have a close friend,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a videographer, producer. I mean, he has many talents. I mean, he's directed videos for some of rap's elite. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Fat Joe, Nas, all kinds of stuff, right? And I remember an incident. This is funny. A lady was protesting with a sign, and this white gentleman decided to come up, and he snatched the sign out of her hand and like broke it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, she's gonna say something. She's gonna have something to say about that, you
Yeah.
know. And the only thing that they showed on the news was her in the guy's face,
Mm-hmm.
not what led up to her responding a particular way. And that's just seems, I feel like that's what media does.
Yeah.
You know, we're portrayed in a certain light to keep people steeped in ignorance, to paint. It's like the same shit painting us as savages.
Mm-hmm.
And they do it with redaction.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so important for artists like yourself or my wife and I to have these archives to kind of set the record straight. I mean, that's what I loved about Ida B. Wells.
Mm-hmm.
She produced her own paper, and she's like, look, I'm going to talk about these lynchings. I'm going to give you the numbers so
Mm-hmm.
you understand clearly what's happening here.
Yeah. Like, and even like I started to put my work took a different spin, and I guess I was kind of like validated in my purpose when the uh the riots in Ferguson, the whole Mike Brown situation, that combination of traditional media meeting new media, like in terms of what people were seeing on the news and what people
Right.
were actually being told on Twitter, which was still more or less moving based off how the people move. And even Instagram, like before all the algorithmic changes,
Hmm.
like you could get up to the minute information. But I remember like, when things started changing and then people were like, oh, there was a thing to go to. I didn't know. This just popped up on my timeline 2 days later. Or, I just never even saw it. So, redaction and, just control of what we see and what we know is really all around us. It's really hard to, you know, combat all of this. So, I mean, at minimum, I think it's just good to have a healthy practice, and to be consistent. And that's really, what motivates me to focus on what I do. I didn't really document too much last year. I kind of like felt a little out of, my energy just wasn't really aligning with wanting to be out yelling in the streets and doing all that stuff.
No, totally, totally, totally. I mean, the way I look at it, there's a place, there's a position for everyone.
Mm,
And I'm from St. Louis,
mm,
and I know how racist the cops can be in Ferguson. And truth be told, I went to school with Mike Brown Sr. It didn't click or register until I saw his face. I was like, wait a minute. We grew up together. We went to grade school together.
mm,
And I was like, oh man, like it was just a trip. I don't know. It's like it just felt like time stood still. Like I knew this happened to someone that was so close to me,
mm,
and the treatment, the way that they treated that young man, and the lies that were being told. Here's an eerie thing. I remember in grad school doing this um, first year show,
mm,
and I went to as they would consider a very prestigious university in St. Louis. It was
mm.
WashU, and I could pick up the vibes that they just wasn't feeling a brother coming in here talking about black struggle.
Yeah.
I'm not here to paint trees, and I'm not knocking people that do that, but that's just not, that does nothing for me.
Mm,
I'm steeped in racism. I can get in my car tomorrow and I can get pulled over and shit can go south. That's a reality for most black people and people of color.
mm,
So for me, for both of us, we just have to address it. And I remember listening to audio from Ferguson, and I was able to find audio from 68 protests with the Panthers. And here's what happened, Artemis. I'm listening to both of them and extracting different parts to basically create this soundscape. And
Mhm.
they sound eerily the same. The way that the police responded to the protesters, hold on, babe, you have to keep it down there. My wife, I'm sorry, my daughter's so loud. The way that the police responded to protesters,
Mhm.
and back during Ferguson, the protests, and then during 68, the way that they were responding to the people, the
Mhm.
Panthers, it was the same tone, it was the same almost language. And I tell people today, it's like it's 2021, we all vote, and nothing's changed.
Right.
My question to you is, I wonder, you know, you talk about redaction and it's everywhere around us, even on social media. They can toy with algorithms and things can be seen or not seen. People are shadow banned for going against the status quo.
Mhm.
Anything digital can be tampered with. They can take it down. You can't access it. The website can load slowly or not at all. Have you ever considered doing something tangible, like a physical way, a physical archive, to
Uh,
combat maybe that being used as a tool of redaction online?
well, I mean, I probably just made a face because I was just thinking of like what a physical archive would look like for me, being that the tools that I use for documentation. I mean, they do produce digital images. You have the option to create something that people can engage with in the real world. So if we're looking at it from that standpoint, this exhibit is an example of that. Just being able to control, what exactly my images look like in a sense where I'm not making films for a particular audience to be consumed in a particular way.
Hmm.
And I have spaces, that I can show that work and it'll be undisturbed, unmanipulated.
Hmm.
Um, I think that, there's a lot of power in uh, reintroducing people to the idea of like more intimate settings. Like people are so inclined to tell everybody about every single thing that they're doing. And, that's an ineffective way to organize against, you know, a system, that feels a certain way about you.
Hmm.
You got to do
Hmm.
things a little more quiet.
Hmm.
So, I mean, if a
Hmm.
film is going to be, like the way that we're going to do it, you can't expect to sell a film, about the liberation of your own people to, a place or, a network that doesn't align, like with your personal thought. So I think, that's the first way of like, putting something in a physical space, because I mean, the people who need to get it and the people who are interested in it, you can touch them, like you talk to them, you can get a sense of it. I mean, it kind of takes things really back in time a little bit, like when we did put a lot more work into on the ground, organization and beating the
Hmm.
street and things
Hmm.
like that. Um, I do need to do a better job of making more prints of my photos. Uh, it's just because I have like so many. I wanted to take the time, during COVID to really like go through my archives and like really like just organize this body of work that I've gotten in Atlanta. Like I've been here for 10 years and I
Hmm.
focus mostly on the creative community and,
Hmm.
just all those things that influence us.
Hmm.
Um, so that's still something that I have to do. But I mean, like I'm looking at rolls of film, stuff that I still got to develop. So it's like a mixed practice.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a few different ways that I'm looking at just still kind of finishing the work. I feel like I have a lot of unfinished work, just based off the fact that it hasn't been shared, and I've honestly been trying to figure out the best ways to do it. A lot of it I don't think is for the internet in a sense. Like, I definitely don't care about likes and all that at this point. It's nice, but like I've been a part of all this social media stuff since it became a thing,
Right.
and I've watched it change. And maybe Instagram is on the way out, maybe not. I don't know. It was real weird last week, but it just shows, like the delicacy of like, these systems, that we choose to put our work in, like it's not ours. So it can be changed at any moment.
Totally. And I think that's the reason why Danielle and I love books.
Mm.
Our
That's what I
information.
want to do. I do want to publish more books. That's a good point that you brought up.
I mean, look, say the word. That's what we do.
Hmm.
We're designers. I mean, we design and we
Can you
produce
hear
our
that
own.
music?
Yeah, a little bit.
All right. I mean, there's somebody
Don't bother.
next to me.
It's all right. So
Okay.
look, my daughter's been barging in here talking, so it's all good.
Okay.
This is real shit, right?
Yeah, I just didn't want it to be disturbing and everything because like they make beats next door, but sometimes that's like, all right, everybody don't make beats in here.
I mean, I think that's why we love to make publications. It's because if we put something online or on a site or is digital, the thing that we fear is it can be tampered with.
Hmm.
A book is it's no real way that you can stop books from spreading around.
Yeah,
I mean,
just
books can go from a tangible thing that people can take pictures of and they can archive and they can share. The book itself can spread from house to house or person to person. There's not much that people really can clamp down on with books. And I think that's been like the sweet spot for us
hmm.
is to be able to have the skill set to design effectively, but produce our own publications.
Yeah, which is really important these days, especially because we have like even more tools available to us to self-publish, like self-publishing, and it goes beyond blog posts and Instagram posts. Like I just Candela as a gallery. They publish books, and they mentioned somebody to me, Chris Graves, who is
Oh
also
yeah.
yeah, and me and him were emailing before I got to Richmond, so obviously I'm in the right spaces, just in terms of like these thoughts I'm having about publishing and creating physical things, because the reason like why I know books are so important, like my grandfather, he was heavily involved in the movement in the 60s and 70s,
Hmm.
and he's like 85 years old now, and he gave me some books that survived a flood, survived like a building burning down, and these are
Mm,
books that he was given when he got out of jail, to begin
mm,
you know retraining his mind, to like
mhm,
to think a different way. So being
mhm,
able to look at the types of information that people were getting and receiving back in the 70s, to fight these battles, to empower their communities. It's still something that we have to continue to do. Like Souls of Black Folk, like it's a timeless work, and when you read it, a lot of the things that are being described are like no different. And this book was written in the early 1900s. The
mhm.
miseducation of the Negro, I believe, like it reads like something that's happening right this moment. And it
Yeah.
was, published in like the 50s. So books, you know, the fact that, like they just kind of are what they are,
Mhm.
like I think that's really important. Like, that it was never changed.
There's a book you may have heard of it. Black Skin, White Mask. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-hmm.
Franz Fanon. I'm pretty sure I butchered his first name, but you absolutely must grab that book. Let me tell you, I'm working on my thesis in grad school. My friends talked me into going back to grad school. They gave me a scholarship. My wife was pushing me. And, for the most part, it did make me think even more critically. I was very critical and a very deep thinker. And they kind of allowed a space for you to, do that. So that's one seed that germinated. But also I had to challenge certain constructs or
Mm-hmm.
stereotypes and things of that nature. And that's not saying that every professor was like that, but there were certainly a couple that didn't like me, exposing some of the supremacy that still exists. I
Yeah.
was in the library, and sometimes you're looking for a specific book, and then there are other books that are in the same maybe category of information.
Yeah.
And I just happened to stumble upon his book, and I opened it, and I read like 2 pages, and I was hooked. I think you will find that book very fascinating. He
Mm-hmm.
mentioned something about like double consciousness. So
Yeah.
there's a part in the book where he talks about being judged as a black man in the now. He
Hmm.
talks about being judged or taxonomized in the past. So how black folks were looked upon as savages. It was like three ways he was being judged almost at once. And I just thought
Right.
that was such an interesting concept to like delve into. And I haven't read the whole book yet. I do have it, but I think you'll be fascinated by it's a little heady at times, but it's a really good read.
If I could read W.E.B. Du Bois, then I think I could manage it. Because Du Bois, he was definitely letting them white folk know, like, I know these words, okay? So,
Right.
I'll be like, all right, let me hit up the thesaurus so that,
You hear me?
but that concept that you talk about, just even, the idea of like feeling like you're being judged three different types of ways, I think it's a really crucial construct to free yourself from, like as a black person. Like it really just boils down to like, not giving a fuck about what people think about you.
Right.
Like it's key, like to living a semi peaceful life because, you know, me as a college graduate, like I really, I went to this prestigious university. I went to Tuskegee, and like it means this certain thing to Black people in the South, Black people in general. And a lot of times, like I'm very aware of how people perceive me just based off of how I decide to present a particular day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then there are the days, like where I'm still me, but maybe I got on a Tuskegee hoodie. And, people who might have judged me a certain way, black people who might have judged me a certain way without it. Now
Mm.
it's just like, oh, brother, you went to Tuskegee. Like, I might not have graduated. Like, I might have just got it during homecoming. But, like just the fact, that I guess I just at least know about something like that. Like, it's a weird, thing to process, like that something, that's really just trivial. It's just a champion hoodie. Um, but I mean, it says so much without people having really an understanding for any deeper part of you, like in what you do and how you think about things, how you think about your own people.
It's weird that you say that is, my wife has seen it. People will introduce us because we're a duo. We work together. Um, and she's an excellent experimental writer. Those blue banners that are hanging in the gallery
Mm,
she just tapped into the ancestors and she just started writing. And
mm,
she's like, I feel like these need to be banners. And I was like, I got you. And that's how we work. We ping pong ideas off of each other.
and stuff.
And people will introduce us and say, "Oh, this is Workplay." Danielle and Kevin, they have a studio, and they'll say, "Oh, by the way,
Mm,
Kevin is a Washington University
mm,
graduate," and it's like, and then all of a sudden, people are like, "Oh, really?" And it's like, "Well, what is that?" Like you've reduced me to just that. So if that was never mentioned, the
mm.
conversation would be cut right there.
Right.
Our work is automatically kind of discounted, but because I now have this connection to this prestigious university in St. Louis, now you want to hear what I have to say, and it's just like,
Yeah.
why are we reduced to that? you know
Yeah, like it's a tweet. Like I'm on Twitter still pretty frequently. Um, big, I think it's Big Swarberg. I just get them all jumbled together because it's an iconic name. But one of the dudes who was originally like a part of Jay Z's success, he's a frequent tweeter. He put up a tweet that says a lot of times people ask what you do for a living so they can begin to calculate your self worth. It's like,
yep.
okay, let me see like how long this conversation needs to go, and I just think about simple things, like I don't know why I got on this particular analogy at one point in life, but like people who might make zippers or something like that, like a zipper as like a business is really like genius because I mean everybody gonna need a zipper at some point, but if you tell people that maybe you make zippers, then it's just like, oh, okay, as opposed to maybe you're a lawyer or a national marketing director or something like that. But a question I do want to ask, like before we wrap up, like, and I mean, you can just ping pong it back to me as well. what do you the work that you guys create? What do you who is it for, and just like why, like what's the intention, like behind it, like what do you want people to take from it, and how do you want people to feel as a result of seeing it?
That's a very good question. I mean, it's certainly for us.
Mm-hmm.
It's for um, our people,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess I understand that there's a system in place, and the system. We can lock up one officer that crossed the line, but the system will still be there.
Yeah.
And so the system requires other people to work and do their jobs. So it has no head and no tail. The only thing that you can do is affect the people that are part of the system, whether that's us or others. So
Mm-hmm.
initially, for us, we would like to inform our people of what has happened, what exists, how they have done this, so it doesn't repeat itself. Um, to get people to fight back.
Mm-hmm.
We've been doing the same thing over and over. And frankly, listen, I'm just going to keep it a buck. We're in the same situation.
Yeah.
Our people have been prayerful. My family will say, well, prayer is this. And it's like, okay, that's cool. But what are we praying about? Are you praying for forgiveness? Because they were doing that, the enslaved, and they hung them from trees.
Mm-hmm.
You saying democracy is it? Okay, yeah, we went to the polls and then the politicians renege on their promises.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, is putting information out there to get people to kind of step back and then adjust or reassess how they do things.
Right, right, right.
You know, okay, now we know what they've done here. They've done this here. Here's the history and the research to back it. Now, how do you choose to take that information to liberate your people, your communities? That's pretty much the gist.
Yeah, yeah.
What about you?
um well, my work is it's designed to respond to just the climate in a way that lets us know that we did something more than just suffer. Because to go back to the point of how the media is controlled and how we're painted, it wouldn't make sense for me to make more work that brings too much attention to those negative aspects of things. So like, I do think a large part of revolution, is love, and making sure that that's a part of it, and being open to like different expressions of love, for your people, for yourself. I mean, honestly, to love your people is to love yourself. So when I started presenting my work in gallery spaces, and seeing how people responded to it, like people always get like a really warm, emotional feeling, that isn't even about them understanding a specific thing that I was trying to do or a story that I was trying to tell. It's just really about a feeling, and it's really
Mm,
about I guess an understanding, that sometimes you got to show people things, that they might not know, that they're not seeing
mm,
enough.
mm,
Uh, I think just even the word love, or hearing the word love, is something that people need more of.
mm,
I don't want to just do something like just write love a million times, but
mm,
being able to show people that it manifests in a lot of different ways, be it a moving image, be it a still image, um, and just making sure that it's all black. That's essentially like what motivates me to do things the different ways that I do it.
Listen, I'm telling you, the work that is very inspiring because the work that we produce I'm gonna be honest, it's difficult.
Yeah.
It's painful to kind of regurgitate, but it's like if you don't warn people, the analogy that I look at it is, if I know that there's a certain set on a certain block, and if you go over there, it's gonna be an issue, right? If I don't tell you, hey, look, man, this is what happened last week. Don't go over there. It's kind of live. And I let you go over there and something bad happens, that's going to be on my conscience.
Mm,
So I feel like, part of it is, all right, here's what they've done. All right, here's how you protect yourself from that. And maybe here's a different way of thinking about it. It's like all in one. And I ain't
mm,
gonna lie to you, that piece for the show, the paper was supposed to be a physical paper. There's a lot of shit in there. It is.
Yeah.
But sometimes you got to throw the brick in the windshield to keep a person from driving off the cliff.
Yeah.
You know, if they got the music up, you like, hey, look, stop, stop. That's happened. That's a metaphor. That has actually happened. This
Hmm.
lady was coming down the street full force, but she didn't know what was coming on the cross street. There were some guys running from the cops. And we're
Yeah.
like blowing the horn, and she was not, she was completely oblivious. And I had to like literally like run to the car and beat the glass, like, stop. And she finally stopped, and soon, like 3 minutes later, they flew by. They would have T-boned her.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe this paper is the brick in the windshield. It's like, listen, we don't want you to drive off the cliff, but where we're headed, it ain't looking good.
Yeah. And then, that gives you the space to show people something else. So, as long as the work is timely and, you got the option to keep creating it, it's, you just got to give yourself the option to like expand and, like people have the ability to see it. So, I mean, I think, yeah, obviously they put us next to each other for good reason, because it's like complementary,
Yeah.
what's going on. Hmm.
Artemis, it's been a pleasure
Yeah, for
to
sure.
chat with you.
I could definitely talk for another 15, but
For sure.
we gotta do the thing.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I definitely enjoyed it.
Yes. And like I said, we should follow each other on
Mhm.
social media.
Yeah,
We're
so tell the people what that is.
Yeah, so we're at work, WRK_play,
Hmm.
and then let them know, and let's just follow each other, and let's see what we can make together.
Yeah, for sure. I'm Artemus Jenkins on anything. So as long as you make sure you put a U instead of a I, you will find me, artemisjenkins.com, Artemis Jenkins on Twitter, Instagram. Yep, there it is. Mm.
Boom. I think there'll be some interesting work. I love collaborating with people, different aspects, different viewpoints,
Mm.
a different way of working. And that's affected us. We've worked with tattoo, artists, chefs, and
I did a
each time,
documentary on tattoo artists.
no shit. What's the documentary?
I did it and I released it in 2012, so it's on YouTube, available for the people to just see. They're like we made 5,000 copies, so it's a collector's item. We only made one run of them, so anybody who got it, they got something really special. But it's called Color Outside the Lines, and it's
Mm.
documentation of the world's top Black tattoo artists. So it gets into the historical aspect of how people were, uh, you know, kind of oppressed and, like not being included in the art form and essentially how we made a way like we always do.
Oh, brother. Now I gotta check. Now you gave me some homework. Okay, since you shared that, I gotta share one last thing.
Okay.
Go to PBS and
Uh-huh.
look up Driving While Black.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. It just talks about black mobility and the
Hmm.
restriction of black mobility, but it really paints a clear picture on, it gives you all the puzzle pieces as to how all of this shit got built in the first place.
Yeah. Well, you gave me homework twice. I got black mask, white face. Is that what it is? Or
Uh,
black
bl-
face, white mask?
Black skin, white mask.
Got it. And driving while black.
Yeah,
Got it. Okay.
Artemis, this has been a pleasure, man. We could chat for almost another hour.
Yeah, but I'm gonna make sure I follow you and we can, just keep in contact for sure.
For sure, man. Be easy, blessed to you, blessings,
Hmm.
and
Peace,
let's
man.
keep in touch. Peace.